Welcome to the World War YouTube channel, where we zoom into events from World War I and World War II, and we do that every Friday. So don't forget to subscribe, and let's jump into this first topic, that is the Jewish propaganda during the Nazi regime. Of course, all of us wanted to make sure that Hitler went to art school, so this never happened. But sadly, this isn't the case, so we will be jumping into a few events that happened throughout time. So in 1933, the Nazis got their seizure of power in Germany, and keep in mind that Germany was actually broken after World War I. There was inflation, there was not enough money, the country wasn't even built up that well, there was not a lot of work as well. It was just a big mess. And then there was their savior, almost like a type of Jesus, that was Hitler, that said, I'm going to make everything all right. So he planted that seed of manipulation very early in his reign of terror throughout Germany. What of course wasn't terror in the beginning, because everything felt safe. Often that is how abuse starts, if I may add. So in 1933, he was already so smart enough to open the Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, and gave that to Joseph Goebbels to make sure that that was held well. And Joseph Goebbels wasn't very well in a lot of things, but he took this job very seriously. And of course, he did very well, because at the end of the day, those flags, those films, those pamphlets, the educational material, everything was a la Nazi made, and influenced people to make hate and make violence towards Jewish people, Gypsy people, homosexuals, and basically everything that wasn't an Übermensch. So a person that is, Caucasian, that is European, blue eyes, blonde hair, that was something that Hitler idolized. So eventually Joseph Goebbels made sure that all of that propaganda was seen through art, music, theater, films, books, radio, educational material, and even the press. So one part of this art is very interesting, if I may say, because nowadays if we look at art and somebody just put down a pencil there, we can say it's art. If somebody draws an ear where the eye should be, we call that art. But back in the day, during the reign of Hitler, he only wanted art that was physically anatomical correct with the human body, so you could see that Übermensch. So what he eventually did is that he took out a lot of art from musea that was not correct and wasn't in his view, and he also burned a lot of books that were false and shouldn't be there. So there were of course several audiences for Nazi propaganda, and one of them, and of course the big audience, was the German people of Germany. So they slowly got manipulated in different ways on thinking that the Jewish people were the cause of all problems in their country. And if we just took the Jewish people away, all of these problems wouldn't be there anymore, aka the black sheep method. And of course, they were also being told about the Soviets, so about the communism and how bad it was as well. So you saw that they targeted specifically in their propaganda two groups, and of course the Jewish people predominantly, that they don't belong in Germany or in whole Europe. And keep in mind that Europe wasn't established back then, so it's something that actually happened after the war. So one of these moments that you can see how hateful the people have become, towards the Jewish people, was with Kristallnacht. In Kristallnacht, they actually went to the stores at night of Jewish, store owners, and they broke down the glass window. And in the morning, when the Jewish people would came there, they would see that that hard-working store that, they worked for so hard was broken down. And that was like a sign for them that, things aren't going the right way. And this man that had some influence is really getting a lot of influences now. I also would like to add something to this. We're talking about the German society of back in the day, and the whole group, all people in Germany. But also keep in mind that not all Germans were, for Hitler. At the end of the day, he didn't get 100% voting back in the day. So not everybody liked the way he taught and what he wanted for the country, and how he treated Jewish people. So that discrimination that was getting higher and higher was something that was now really leaking through Germany, but also to the other places. And specifically when Germany went to war and wanted to have several countries as a one big Reich, he made sure that that propaganda was also going to soldiers, police officers, and non-German people, so people that they already, had as a country. So, for example, the Netherlands or Belgium, so they could go in that same way of thinking. Also, keep in mind that next to the Jewish propaganda that they were actually distributing, there was also distribution of the propaganda against the communists, because back in the day, Hitler wanted to make sure that people believed that these communists were a real big threat to Germany, and they wanted to bring their perspective down. And this Western Germany does only want to help the world, and the communists are the bad guys in this case. And of course, this is 101 brainwashing, but it is something that he did to the German society to make sure that they were on his side. And at the end of the day, this also cost a lot of lives, because this was, the way to influence soldiers to make sure that you are going to fight for your country, for your own country, and protect it. So next to this part, something very predominant, a very smart tool came into the hands of Hitler and Joseph Goebbels, and that was film. So film was back in the day something very exciting to go to, because it was something new. Back in the day, they were busy with radio or didn't really have something, maybe, theater, but not films that you could see. So the Nazis heavily invested in films to make sure that they could influence people, because people were already going massively to films, and they were making, of course, their own production of German films. And one of the things that they would do is, before they would go to the film, you could see the propaganda part in front, or there just would be only a propaganda film. So Leni Riefenstahl, she made a big film for the influencing of people, and this was basically one big propaganda film that glorified Hitler and the Nationalist Socialist movement. She also did a Festival of the Nations and the Festival of Beauty, and this was all made for the Berlin Olympic Games and promoted national pride in the successes of the Nazi regime at the Olympics. A fun fact to add on is that during the Olympics, a black African American man, he won the running part, and Hitler couldn't stand it and he walked away. And I just like to add that because I think that's amazing that happened. And it's just beautiful to show him that he cannot have everything that he wants. And yeah, just think that's a good add-on. I want to jump to another part as well, and that are the role of newspapers. So there were a lot of different newspapers, and all of them were quite influenced by the Nazi regime, as in a big part of production was in their hands, in the hands of the government. And these were very strategic, because people would still read back in the day the newspaper every day. It was a very strong tool, just like we have our phones nowadays. So there would stand information that would be perceived as the truth. So if you would read, for example, that Jewish people were not only subhuman but also dangerous enemies for the German Reich, at some point, if you hear lies a lot, you will perceive them as somewhat of the truth. So this was, Hitler's way to influence, your average Joe on information that these people are just up to no good. And then there's this last part that I think is the most sneakiest of all, is that when you have so much influence and you can influence every, paper in your country, every radio station, every film, you could even, print information on toilet paper. He didn't inform the people of Germany what really happened to the Jewish people or the Gypsy people or the people that were disabled or the people that were homosexual. He didn't tell people what happened to them. So a lot of people just perceived that they were taken away and were put in a country, that was less worthy than Germany. So for example, Poland. And they were just, took out of this Reich. Or some people wouldn't like to admit to the fact for the things that have happened. But at the end of the day, he didn't use his big network of propaganda to inform people what he did with the Jews, because he knew that when he would do that, that Germany would go against him. Because you maybe think that somebody, is off, but you wouldn't say, let's go and murder 6 million Jews, because at the end of the day he did that. So he put them into concentration camps, and I think one of the most famous one is Auschwitz, where the gate says Arbeit macht frei, so work will set you free. Or you still had Birkenau, and a lot of things. And a very sneaky thing that he did is that he made sure that a lot of those camps weren't in Germany, so people couldn't basically see what happened. But also, of course, because of these Untermenschen, he didn't even want them to die in his country. So he brought them to countries, for example, like Poland, that he already fined wordless, so the wordless people could die there. So eventually, Germany didn't really want to surrender, and what happened is, next to those concentration camps where people already were getting killed, gas chambers, were stripped of all their belongings, were getting tattooed, were just becoming a number, was not a person with a name anymore, was thrown into the gas chamber, was burned to death, or either worked to death, and was underfed extremely. He didn't want to give up, so he started out the death marches all the way to the end of the war, where a lot of people died as well. And of course, at the end of the day, we all know how that ended, that people eventually got to know what happened and they got liberated. And for the German community, it was a true shock to discover what a man that they trust so much in the beginning in 1933 had done with 6 million Jews and so many other people as well. And do keep in mind that there were a lot of deaths at the Communist Party as well. So the strength of propaganda, and that's why this episode is made, is very, very powerful. And even up till today, that propaganda, or in this case social media, depending on which part you will go from the algorithm of social media, can have so much influence in the way you think. So my advice to you is to always stay critical with the person in front of you, and how much of that the person is really saying is the truth. Because at the end of the day, this man that was so promising in 1933 is the man with the most death on his hands in the world. So this was this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you the next time, every Friday.